There are many words in the Bible that key us into big things are going to happen or important moments are going to happen. We've talked about how the idea of trees or gardens is something that's important to Scripture. And today I want to talk about another one of those words. And that word is the word east. When the word east is brought up, you know that something big is going to happen. You see, in Genesis 2, we see that the Garden of Eden was planted where? To the east of where Adam was formed. He moved out of the chaos, as we talked about in the last video, into the calmness, into the order that God had created in the east. We see that any time that God is referenced in the east, it's about this idea of hope and holiness. So east represents, when God is there, this idea of holiness. But when people travel to the east, you typically see the opposite. You see people that are trying to get away from God or trying to run from God. You see people traveling from a good place to a bad place. So when Cain kills Abel, he runs to the east. We see things like that happening over and over again. There's a star in the east where they travel then to the east, and this idea of the killing of the babies happens as they tell Herod about it. So when these words come up, when this word like east comes up, or tree or garden, so it should start to pique our interest. So let's look at it in Genesis 2. We have this man created, God creates man and breathes into him, but it's not suitable, so he moves him to the east. Well, what else happens in the east? What else is going on in the east? Well, now there's a garden. There's this idea that we have created a place that God is holy, and now we are to work it. And what happens in the story in the next chapter? We see that they get kicked out. They get kicked out of the garden. They have to travel elsewhere. So now we are trying to obtain this. But the problem with inside of the Bible, the problem with inside of this narrative, is we can't obtain holiness. So when I read the stories and when I see east, this is what I think of. I personally start to think that what is holiness? If God is the idea of holiness and we can't seem to obtain holiness, well, what is holiness, as well as who dictates holiness? I find it funny a lot of times that we, as human beings, start to say what's holy. Oh, that new worship song was so holy. Oh, that place is so holy. I would be a little worried if I'm the one choosing what is holy and what isn't. Because let me be honest with you, I'm not going to choose the same thing God does. And you're not going to choose the same thing God does. That's the idea of trying to run to holiness. We can't create it. We can't manufacture it. We can't stamp it and make anything holy. We just show up. And God's already in that place. We can start to recognize holiness. But when we start to try to manufacture it, when we start to try to go to it, when we start to try to run to the east, when we start to try to run to the garden, we really start to mess things up. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't create, or that doesn't mean we shouldn't do these things. But I think that we need to be able to seek God in a way that we start to recognize and get His eyes, get His feelings, to get His thoughts on what is holy, where we are supposed to be going. You know, there was a song that came out probably about 10 years ago, and it talked about, give us your eyes, give us your thoughts. And when I had planted a church, and I remember my best friend going, this is like your church's theme song. This is like your life song. And it's true. I don't want my own understanding. I don't want my own thoughts on what is holy. I don't want my own, life to create holiness. I want to fall in line with God. What would happen if Adam and then subsequently Eve would have followed God's line, God's thoughts, would have followed God's plan? Well, the world would be a lot different. We wouldn't have evil. We wouldn't have chaos. And I want to get back to the point to where in my life, even if it doesn't look good to me, but it is what God is calling me to do, I want to follow that. That is one of the big principles of the Bible, is that we are to seek His righteousness, and then all things will fall into place. Not we are supposed to seek our happiness, our joy, our understanding, because ours is, well, to be honest, worthless. So when you start to see words like this, directional words, and especially the word east, start to realize that it's about God's holiness, that God's pushing us somewhere, that God's calling you to His ways, not to our own way, not to our own idea. And there is no possible way ever that you can create holiness. It is only through God that we can even enter in and touch or even come close to what is holy.